Welcome in. This dateless buffalo nickel may look ordinary, but why did its date disappear? And could the details still hiding on the coin reveal something collectors care about? Let's investigate. First coin. The 1936 United States buffalo nickel occupies a fascinating place near the end of one of America's most recognizable coin series, and at first glance, it can be dangerously easy to underestimate. Millions were produced, many survived, and worn examples still appear in old collections, inherited jars, dealer boxes, and occasionally mixed groups of obsolete U.S. coinage. Yet the date becomes far more complicated once condition, mint of origin, strike quality, die variety, and preservation enter the discussion. A heavily circulated Philadelphia coin and an exceptionally preserved mint state specimen may share the same date while belonging to entirely different levels of the collector market. Add the Denver and San Francisco issues, recognized repunched mint marks, double die varieties, and the famous Denver 3½ legs variety, and 1936 becomes a year that rewards careful examination rather than assumptions. Later, we will look at what professionally authenticated examples have actually sold for, why certain pieces have reached extraordinary auction levels, and what separates an ordinary survivor from a coin capable of attracting serious competitive bidding. Those distinctions matter because a date alone never establishes rarity or value. Authentication, numerical grade, strike, surface quality, variety attribution, and current collector demand all work together, and the smallest detail can sometimes make the largest difference. To understand the coin properly, it helps to return to the America in which it circulated. The buffalo nickel, officially the Indian head 5-cent piece, had been introduced in 1913 from designs by sculptor James Earl Fraser, and by 1936, the series had become a familiar part of everyday commerce. The country was still recovering from the Great Depression. Franklin D. Roosevelt was approaching the end of his first presidential term, and 5 cents remained meaningful purchasing power in ordinary life. Fraser's design gave that everyday denomination an unusually sculptural character. The obverse presents a Native American profile rather than a president, while the reverse features an American bison standing on a raised ground line. Fraser stated that the portrait was a composite inspired by Native American models rather than a literal portrait of one individual, while the bison has long been associated in popular numismatic tradition with black diamond, an animal once displayed in New York. By 1936, the design had already demonstrated one of its practical weaknesses. Its bold relief and exposed details could wear heavily in circulation, particularly around the date and the high points of the portrait and buffalo. That vulnerability explains why countless buffalo nickels encountered today have soft detail, weak dates, or extensive wear. It also explains why sharply defined, minimally marked survivors are dramatically more desirable. The 1936 Philadelphia issue alone had a mintage of 118,997,000 pieces, so its importance is not based on low original production. Its real challenge emerges at the upper end of the grading scale, where preservation becomes vastly more important than the number originally struck. Physically, the 1936 buffalo nickel followed the established specifications of the series. It weighs 5 grams, measures approximately 21.2 millimeters in diameter, has a plain edge, and consists of 75% copper and 25% nickel. Despite the familiar nickname, nickel, only 1/4 of the alloy is actually nickel. Copper forms the majority. That copper-nickel combination is durable but relatively hard, and striking a design with Fraser's substantial relief could produce variations in definition from one coin to another. The Philadelphia Mint struck coins without a mint mark, while Denver pieces carry a small D and San Francisco pieces an S beneath the denomination on the reverse. Denver produced 24,814,000 regular 1936 D nickels, considerably fewer than Philadelphia, and the mint mark becomes particularly important because some Denver dies created varieties that collectors actively pursue. During production, prepared planchets were fed into presses and struck between obverse and reverse dies under tremendous pressure. Die wear, polishing, clashes, minor misalignment, planchet problems, and differences in striking pressure could leave characteristics that survive on individual coins today. This is why experienced collectors do not merely read the date. They study the hair and feather detail on the Native American portrait, the buffalo's horn, shoulder, head, hip, and leg definition, the ground beneath the animal, the lettering, and the surfaces surrounding the devices. A clean, powerful strike with original mint luster can elevate an otherwise common date into a far more competitive category. Grading is where the financial story begins to separate dramatically. On circulated buffalo nickels, professional graders examine how much original detail remains and where friction has removed the highest portions of the design. As a coin progresses through good, very fine, extremely fine, and about uncirculated territory, the date becomes stronger, the portrait regains detail, the buffalo shows more complete anatomy, and the surfaces reveal progressively less circulation wear. Mint state begins when there is no actual circulation wear, but that does not automatically make every uncirculated coin expensive. Grades such as MS60 through MS64 can contain contact marks, weaker strikes, or less attractive surfaces, while gem levels such as MS65 and MS66 require increasingly strong eye appeal. At MS67 and beyond, tiny differences become financially significant because the population of qualifying coins falls sharply. Unlike copper cents, buffalo nickels are not formally divided into red, red-brown, and brown color designations. Those classifications apply to copper coinage. Collectors instead consider originality, luster, tunning, strike, and surface preservation. A beautifully preserved 1936 Philadelphia nickel can develop soft silver gray, champagne, gold, blue, or other natural tunning, but artificial coloration, harsh cleaning, polishing, or chemical treatment can seriously reduce desirability. Current PCGS guide levels illustrate the condition sensitivity. Ordinary mint state examples remain comparatively accessible, while very high grades rise into the hundreds or thousands. Depending on grade, certification, eye appeal, and market conditions, particularly strong pieces can realistically enter ranges around $1,100, $2,600, or more, while lesser examples may be worth nowhere near those figures. The most intriguing part of 1936, however, lies in its varieties, because one unusual die can completely change the identity of a coin. The 1936 Philadelphia issue has recognized double die varieties, including catalogued obverse and reverse doubled dies, while Denver produced repunchment mark varieties in which the D shows evidence of more than one mint mark impression. One recognized 1936 DD variety, FS511, has achieved an authenticated auction record of $5,875 in a very high grade, illustrating what advanced variety collectors may pay when rarity and preservation converge. Far more famous is the 1936 D3 1/2 legs buffalo nickel. This variety resulted from excessive polishing or abrasion of the reverse die, which removed much of the detail from one of the buffalo's front legs. It is related conceptually to the better-known 1937 D three-legged buffalo, although the effect on the 1936 variety is less extreme. A genuine example is not simply a normal nickel with a weak or damaged leg. Specialists examine the complete pattern of die characteristics because circulation wear, post-mint scraping, weak strikes, and intentional alteration can imitate the most obvious feature. PCGS classifies the 1936 D3 1/2 legs as a major variety, and its rarity is dramatically greater than that of a normal 1936 D, depending on certification and grade. Authentic examples can move through four-figure territory and considerably beyond it. Price guide levels for certified pieces extend from roughly the low thousands upward as quality improves. That makes attribution essential before anyone assumes an unusual-looking buffalo is a genuine rare variety. Authentication becomes especially important whenever coin appears to have a scarce variety or unusually high grade. Buffalo nickels are frequently cleaned, altered, chemically treated, scratched, or otherwise modified, and the recessed location of the mint mark makes added or manipulated mint marks an additional concern on valuable issues. A collector examining a potential 1936 rarity should begin with basic physical evidence: correct diameter, approximately correct weight, proper metallic appearance, and design characteristics consistent with genuine dies. Magnification can then reveal suspicious tooling, unnatural scratches, disturbed metal around the mint mark, artificial surface texture, or evidence that a feature has been deliberately removed to simulate a variety. For a 3½ legs candidate, comparison with authenticated diagnostic photographs is far safer than judging the leg alone. The same caution applies to apparent doubled dies. Mechanical or strike doubling can look dramatic to an inexperienced eye, but is not automatically a collectible double die variety. When substantial money may be involved, certification by a respected third-party grading service can establish authenticity, grade, and recognized attribution while protecting the coin inside a tamper-evident holder. Preservation before submission is equally important. Never polish the surfaces, rub them with cloth, use metal cleaner, dip them casually in chemicals, or attempt to brighten dark areas. Original surfaces carry microscopic evidence that professional graders evaluate, and once those surfaces are damaged, they cannot truly be restored. Coins should instead be handled only by their edges and stored in inert, archival quality holders in a stable, dry environment away from PVC-containing plastics, excessive humidity, and abrupt temperature changes. Auction history demonstrates just how wide the value spectrum can become. A normal circulated 1936 Buffalo nickel is not automatically a $1,000 coin, and even many uncirculated pieces remain affordable by serious collector standards. The extraordinary results belong to coins at the extreme edge of preservation or rarity. PCGS records show that a Philadelphia 1936 Buffalo nickel graded MS-68 sold through heritage auctions for $18,000 on August 31, 2025. That result should never be interpreted as the value of an average 1936 nickel. It represents an elite certified example in an exceptionally high grade. The broader PCGS auction database has recorded similarly striking differences among the year's issues, including auction records of $37,375 for 1936D, $18,300 for 1936S, and $20,700 for the 1936D3 half-legs variety. Those numbers are historical auction records for particular certified coins, not promises of what another example will bring. In more attainable segments of the market, collectors might encounter exceptional regular issues or attributed varieties trading around figures such as $1,150, $2,600, $3,250, or $4,500, depending on the exact mint, grade, attribution, certification, and timing of the sale. A tiny increase in numerical grade can sometimes produce a large increase in price because registry set collectors compete for the finest known or finest available pieces. Conversely, cleaning, scratches, environmental damage, weak strike, or questionable authenticity can push a coin far below the value someone might expect from its date alone. The market rewards the complete coin, not merely the year stamped on it. That is ultimately what makes the 1936 Buffalo nickel so revealing as a collector coin. It teaches the difference between mintage and true rarity, between age and condition rarity, and between a dramatic-looking anomaly and an authenticated die variety. Philadelphia's enormous production makes the basic issue readily collectible, yet surviving population becomes progressively thinner as the standards rise toward superb gem condition. Denver adds another layer through its lower mintage and important varieties, while San Francisco contributes its own challenges in high-grade preservation and strike. For collectors building a complete Buffalo nickel set, the year can therefore be approached at several levels. A pleasing circulated example, a sharply struck mint state coin, a high-grade registry quality piece, or a specialized variety such as the Denver 3½ legs. The smartest evaluation begins with the mint mark, then condition, strike, luster, surface originality, and known diagnostics. Only after those questions have been answered should market value become the focus. Auction records prove that extraordinary specimens can command extraordinary prices, but they also demonstrate why professional grading and authentication are so important. The expensive coins are exceptional precisely because ordinary examples do not share their characteristics. Nearly 9 decades after these nickels entered American commerce, the 1936 issue remains a powerful reminder that rarity can hide in preservation, dye preparation, and microscopic detail. Two coins carrying the same date can tell very different stories, and for the serious numismatist, discovering exactly which story a particular buffalo nickel tells is where the real fascination begins. Next coin. The 1923 United States buffalo nickel is one of those coins whose familiar appearance can conceal a much more complicated collecting story, because its true importance is not immediately visible in the date alone. By this point in the buffalo nickel series, James Earl Fraser's rugged design had already spent a decade moving through American commerce, where millions of pieces were handled in stores, carried in pockets, counted at banks, and gradually worn until some of their most important details nearly disappeared. Today, the 1923 issue is highly collectible not because every surviving example is rare, but because the supply changes dramatically as collectors demand stronger strikes, cleaner surfaces, original luster, and progressively higher professional grades. There is another distinction that matters immediately. Philadelphia and San Francisco both produced buffalo nickels dated 1923, and the difference between those two mints can completely transform the rarity equation. Even among coins from the same mint, one piece may be a heavily worn survivor, while another may retain the extraordinary freshness expected from a coin that escaped normal circulation. There is also a recognized 1923 Philadelphia 2 feathers die variety that adds another specialized layer for collectors. Later, the auction history reveals exactly how dramatically these factors can influence what authenticated examples have sold for. But those records make sense only after understanding what separates an ordinary buffalo nickel from an exceptional one. Grade, mint of origin, strike, originality, recognized variety, eye appeal, and professional authentication all matter, and in the highest levels of this market, seemingly minor differences can separate an accessible collectible from a formidable condition rarity. The coin belongs to a period when the United States was experiencing profound social and economic change. Warren G. Harding began 1923 as president, but his sudden death in August brought Calvin Coolidge into the White House, while American industry and consumer culture continued expanding during the early 1920s. Automobiles, radios, electrical appliances, and mass production were reshaping daily life, yet the 5-cent piece remained a practical denomination used constantly in ordinary transactions. The buffalo nickel itself had been introduced in 1913 as part of an effort to bring greater artistic character to American coinage. Sculptor James Earl Fraser created both sides, replacing Charles Barber's Liberty Head nickel with imagery intended to evoke a distinctly American identity. Fraser's obverse shows a powerful Native American profile rather than a president or conventional allegorical liberty. Fraser explained that the portrait was composite in nature, drawing inspiration from Native American models rather than representing a single universally agreed individual. The reverse presents an American bison, an animal deeply associated with the landscape and history of the American West. The design was visually dramatic, but technically demanding. Raised elements were exposed to wear, and earlier modifications to the series had already recessed the denomination to protect it better. By 1923, the coin was the established Type II form of the buffalo nickel, with 5 cents protected within a recessed area beneath the bison. That engineering change helped the denomination survive circulation, but the date and other elevated details could still deteriorate badly, which is why so many old buffalo nickels encountered today show partial or completely lost dates. The historical romance surrounding Fraser's design is therefore inseparable from the practical wear that eventually created much of the modern collecting challenge. A genuine 1923 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel follows the standard physical specifications of the series: 5 grams in weight, approximately 21.2 millimeters in diameter, a plain edge, and an alloy containing 75% copper and 25% nickel. Philadelphia produced 35,715,000 pieces, and because Philadelphia coins carried no mint mark, a normal 1923 nickel without a mark beneath the denomination is the Philadelphia issue. The San Francisco Mint produced only 6,142,000 1923 S nickels, identified by the small s beneath 5 cents on the reverse, making mint attribution essential before attempting any serious valuation. The copper-nickel alloy was durable, but hard enough to make striking quality an important consideration. During production, planchets were fed between engraved dies and struck under substantial pressure, transferring Fraser's sculptural devices into the metal. Die condition, planchet quality, striking pressure, and alignment could affect the finished appearance. On the obverse, collectors examine the Native American's hair, braid, feathers, cheek, and other high-relief areas. On the reverse, attention shifts to the bison's head, shoulder, horn, back, hip, and leg definition. Philadelphia examples are often found with relatively sharp strikes, and specialists have long noted that the issue commonly displays attractive frosty luster in mint state. That combination makes a strong specimen visually impressive, but it also raises the standard by which premium examples are judged. A coin with flatly struck details, distracting marks, or dull surfaces may technically remain uncirculated, yet be less desirable than another specimen of the same numerical grade, with crisp detail and vibrant original luster. This is the first major lesson in evaluating the 1923 Buffalo nickel. Identical dates, and even identical grades, do not necessarily produce identical collector appeal. Circulation transformed these coins in predictable stages, and professional grading attempts to describe those stages consistently. On heavily worn examples, the portrait becomes smooth, the bison loses major internal detail, and the date may become weak. As preservation improves through fine, very fine, extremely fine, and about uncirculated grades, increasing amounts of hair, feather, horn, hide, and other design detail remain visible. Once a coin reaches mint state, normally abbreviated MS, graders expect no actual circulation wear, but mint state itself covers an enormous quality range from MS60 through MS70. A low-end uncirculated Buffalo nickel can display numerous contact marks, subdued eye appeal, or strike deficiencies, while MS64 and MS65 pieces demand progressively cleaner surfaces and stronger overall presentation. MS66 and MS67 coins become much more difficult, especially when collectors insist on excellent strike and originality. PCGS currently estimates roughly 10,000 surviving 1923 Philadelphia examples across all grades, about 2,200 at MS60 or better, and approximately 700 at MS65 or better, although survival estimates are expert estimates rather than exact counts. Current certification data further illustrates the narrowing supply at the top. PCGS reports hundreds at MS65, fewer at MS66, only a small number at MS67 level grades, and an extremely limited population beyond that threshold. Buffalo nickels do not receive the red, red-brown, and brown color designations used for copper cents. Instead, specialists evaluate their natural nickel-gray appearance, luster, tunning, surface quality, and overall eye appeal. Attractive natural coloration can be desirable, but unnatural brightness caused by polishing or harsh cleaning is another matter entirely. Once original metal surfaces are disturbed, even a sharply detailed coin may receive a details designation rather than a normal numerical grade. Value becomes especially interesting when that grading ladder reaches the condition rarity zone. A circulated 1923 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel is not inherently a $1,000 rarity, and even many lower mint state pieces remain relatively affordable compared with the great keys of the series. The market begins changing quickly when preservation becomes exceptional. Current PCGS price guide data places the Philadelphia issue around the 4-figure level, once it reaches approximately MS67 territory, with guide figures around $1,100 at MS67 and roughly $1,750 at MS67 plus, while an MS68 level coin is placed far higher. Price guides are estimates rather than guaranteed selling prices, and actual transactions can move above or below them according to quality and bidding competition. For the 1923S, scarcity becomes apparent much earlier. PCGS guide levels already move into roughly $1,125 around MS64, approximately $2,000 at MS65, and considerably higher at MS66. A particularly attractive certified specimen might therefore reasonably be discussed in collector contexts around $1,275, $2,150, or $3,600, depending on which 1923 issue is involved, the precise grade, strike, originality, and market environment. Those examples are not blanket values for coins found in circulation. They represent the kind of levels that can become relevant when authentication and condition justify them. The reason advanced collectors compete so intensely is simple. Millions of coins may have been minted, but very few survive with virtually untouched surfaces, full luster, strong design definition, and the visual character demanded at elite grades. Condition rarity turns an originally common production run into a very different marketplace generations later. Variety collecting adds another dimension, although it is important not to invent dramatic errors where established numismatic evidence does not support them. For the Philadelphia 1923 issue, PCGS recognizes a two feathers variety catalogued as FS401. Buffalo nickel specialists know that certain two feathers varieties resulted from dye work that removed or obscured one of the smaller feather details behind the Native American's neck, leaving the portrait visibly different from the normal three-feather arrangement. Such a coin should be attributed by its complete diagnostics rather than by casually counting feathers on a worn specimen, because circulation, weak striking, damage, or tooling can eliminate detail and imitate something unusual. The same discipline applies to apparent mint errors. Off-center strikes, clips, laminations, die cracks, and other production anomalies are known across U.S. coinage, but an error should not be attributed specifically to a 1923 Buffalo nickel merely because a surface feature looks strange. Post-mint damage is enormously common. Scrapes, impacts, corrosion, deliberate alterations, and decades of wear can create shapes that resemble mint-made defects to an inexperienced observer. Genuine error value depends on what happened during manufacture, how dramatic and identifiable the error is, how well the coin survives, and whether specialists can authenticate it. The 1923 S deserves especially careful inspection because its substantially lower mintage gives the mint mark financial importance. A suspicious S should never be accepted solely because it appears to be in the correct general location. Serious authentication considers the shape and placement of the mint mark, surrounding metal, die characteristics, and the coin as a whole. When the difference between an ordinary piece and a valuable one becomes substantial, expert certification is far safer than relying on photographs or assumptions. Preservation and authentication are closely connected because many Buffalo nickels were subjected to treatments that earlier generations of owners considered harmless. Someone finding a dark or dirty nickel may be tempted to polish it until it shines, but that can permanently destroy the microscopic surface texture collectors prize. Abrasive cloths leave hairlines, metal polish creates an unnatural reflective appearance, chemical treatments can alter color, and aggressive attempts to remove deposits can expose damaged metal underneath. A potentially important 1923 nickel should be handled by the edges, kept away from PVC-containing plastics, and placed in an inert archival quality holder. Stable temperature and moderate humidity are preferable to garages, damp basements, or locations exposed to rapid environmental changes. Before purchasing an expensive example, collectors should also learn the characteristics of genuine Fraser dies and compare suspected varieties with documented references. Weight and diameter provide useful preliminary checks, but a correct 5-gram neighborhood and approximately 21.2 mm diameter do not by themselves prove authenticity because sophisticated alterations can satisfy basic measurements. Professional services examine surfaces, strike characteristics, dye markers, alteration evidence, and other diagnostics before assigning a grade and certification number. That process becomes increasingly important as the potential value moves into four figures. Certification is not a magical guarantee of future price appreciation. It is a standardized expert opinion concerning authenticity and grade. Market demand still determines what buyers will actually pay, and eye appeal can create meaningful differences even between two coins carrying the same grade on their holders. The auction record finally reveals how extreme those differences can become. PCGS records an auction high of $18,400 for a 1923 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel graded MS-67, sold by Bowers and Mariner in 2003. The 1923 S demonstrates the condition rarity effect even more dramatically. PCGS lists a record of $67,563 for an MS-66 example sold by Heritage Auctions in 2013. Neither result means that an ordinary 1923 or 1923 S Buffalo nickel is worth anything remotely similar. These were authenticated coins at extraordinary levels of preservation, and their prices reflected rarity at grade, quality, and competition at particular auctions. That distinction is the heart of responsible coin valuation. The date identifies the starting point. The mint establishes another layer of scarcity. Strike, wear, luster, marks, originality, and recognized varieties refine the picture. Professional grading provides a standardized assessment, and the marketplace supplies the final verdict. For collectors, the enduring appeal of the 1923 Buffalo nickel comes from precisely this combination of accessibility and difficulty. A basic example connects its owner with American commerce more than a century ago, while an exceptional mint state survivor represents something much rarer, a piece that somehow escaped the destructive journey experienced by nearly all of its contemporaries. The finest coins inspire competition because preservation cannot be recreated. Once original luster is worn away, once a surface is polished, or once a major mark is struck into the metal, no later owner can return that specimen to its original state. That irreversible history gives elite survivors their significance and ensures that the 1923 Buffalo nickel remains far more than an old 5-cent piece. It is a study in how history, metallurgy, craftsmanship, survival, and collector judgment can transform a mass-produced object into a serious numismatic prize. Next coin. Place a 1924 United States Buffalo nickel under good light, and the first mystery appears almost immediately. Why would serious collectors spend so much time studying a 5-cent piece that, at first glance, seems to show nothing more unusual than a Native American portrait and a buffalo? The answer begins with details most people would pass over: the tiny space beneath the denomination, the sharpness of the buffalo's horn and shoulder, the texture of the Native American's hair, the strength of the date, the quality of the fields, and the subtle glow of original mint luster. Even the absence of a tiny letter can matter. 3 United States mints produced Buffalo nickels in 1924, but they did so in dramatically different quantities, creating 3 collecting situations from one date. The Philadelphia issue is comparatively available, Denver is considerably scarcer, and San Francisco produced a low mintage coin that became one of the recognized regular issue keys of the Buffalo nickel series. That means identifying the mint is only the beginning of the investigation. Once the correct issue has been established, experienced collectors begin asking harder questions. Was the coin sharply struck? Has it been cleaned? Does its surface still possess original character? Is the mint mark genuine? Could an apparent irregularity be a legitimate mint-made feature rather than damage? Most importantly, how does the coin compare with the relatively small number of superior survivors competing for attention today? Those questions explain why certain authenticated 1924 Buffalo nickels have become serious numismatic prizes. And later, we will examine the verified auction history that shows just how far exceptional examples can separate themselves from ordinary coins. Before looking for rarity, Examine what this nickel represented when it was new. America in 1924 was moving deeper into the decade remembered as the Roaring Twenties. Calvin Coolidge occupied the White House, industrial production and consumer culture were expanding, automobiles were increasingly reshaping transportation, and radio was becoming part of American home life. 5 cents still possessed practical everyday purchasing power, so Buffalo nickels were working coins rather than objects intended to sit untouched in collections. The design itself had already been circulating since 1913, when sculptor James Earl Fraser's Indian head, or buffalo, nickel replaced the Liberty head nickel. Fraser wanted imagery with an unmistakably American character. On the obverse, he created a powerful Native American profile, generally understood as a composite inspired by Native American models rather than a straightforward portrait of one universally established individual. On the reverse stands an American bison, an animal that visually connected the denomination with the landscape and history of the West. By 1924, the design was in its modified Type II form, with 5 cents placed in a recessed area after the original 1913 raised ground arrangement proved vulnerable to rapid wear. Yet the redesign could not protect everything. The date remained exposed, as did portions of the portrait and buffalo, so decades of circulation often erased exactly the details modern collectors need most. That is why our first physical inspection should begin at the date. A strong, naturally preserved 1924 is fundamentally different from a dateless buffalo nickel whose date has been chemically restored, altered, or otherwise manipulated. From there, move across Liberty, the portrait, the reverse lettering, and finally beneath 5 cents, because that last location tells us which mint produced the coin and changes everything that follows. Turn the nickel over and look directly beneath 5 cents. If there is no mint mark, the coin was struck at Philadelphia, where 21,620,000 buffalo nickels were produced in 1924. A small d identifies Denver, which struck 5,258,000. A small s identifies San Francisco, where production fell to only 1,437,000 pieces, the third lowest mintage of the entire buffalo nickel series. Those figures immediately explain why collectors never value a 1924 buffalo nickel, as though every example were interchangeable. All three issues share the standard physical specifications of the series, approximately 21.2 millimeters in diameter, 5 grams in weight, a plain edge, and a composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. That copper-nickel alloy is durable, but it is also relatively hard, and Fraser's deeply modeled artwork could be challenging to bring up completely during striking. PCGS specifically notes weak striking as a problem affecting many branch-mint buffalo nickels, an important consideration when evaluating these dates. Imagine the manufacturing sequence. Prepared planchets enter a coining press, obverse and reverse dies close under tremendous force, and Fraser's design is transferred into the hard alloy. If pressure, die condition, or planchet characteristics are less than ideal, portions of the design may emerge softly defined even though the coin has never circulated. That is why weakness must not automatically be confused with wear. Experienced collectors study whether the high points are flat because the dies failed to bring them up fully or because circulation actually removed metal. Look closely at the hair and braid on the obverse, then inspect the buffalo's head, horn, shoulder, hip, and leg detail. A coin combining strong definition with undisturbed surfaces has already passed a test that many 1924 survivors cannot. Now tilt the coin slowly beneath a single light source, because surface preservation tells a story that static photographs can easily hide. On an uncirculated buffalo nickel, original mint luster should move across the fields and around the raised devices as the coin changes angle. Circulation friction interrupts that effect on the highest portions first, while cleaning can replace natural texture with hairlines, unnatural brightness, dullness, or an oddly uniform surface. Professional grading converts those observations into an internationally recognized numerical framework. Circulated grades measure progressively greater design retention, while mint state, MS60 and above, requires the absence of actual circulation wear. but an MS-60 coin and an MS-67 coin can look astonishingly different. Lower mint state pieces may contain numerous contact marks, weak eye appeal, or disappointing strikes. At MS-64 and MS-65, surfaces, luster, and presentation become increasingly demanding. MS-66 and higher territory requires a combination that survived remarkably well for a century-old circulation coin. Buffalo nickels are not classified as red, red-brown, or brown in the way copper cents are, so those familiar color designations do not apply here. Instead, collectors consider natural coloration, tunning, brilliance, luster, originality, and overall visual character. At this point, value begins entering the investigation. Current PCGS guide figures show the Philadelphia 1924 around $950 at MS-66 and approximately $1,250 at MS-66 Plus, before rising sharply at MS-67. The 1924D becomes substantially more demanding, with guide levels around $1,375 at MS-64 and approximately $1,750 at MS-65. Those are guide estimates rather than guaranteed selling prices, but they demonstrate the principle. Once quality becomes scarce, collectors stop paying merely for the date and begin paying for preservation. The San Francisco coin takes that principle to another level. With only 1,437,000 originally struck, the 1924S is considered one of the important regular-issue keys of the Buffalo nickel series, and its difficulty is not restricted to spectacular mint state grades. NGC has noted that the issue commands substantial premiums across grades, and cited a guide value of $1,800 even at AU50 when discussing counterfeit detection. Once mint state is reached, current PCGS guide figures climb beyond the general $1,000 to $4,000 range very quickly, approximately $4,750 at MS-60 and $5,750 around MS-63, with substantially greater levels above that. This is why a hypothetical four-figure discussion must always identify the exact coin involved. A certified 1924D might legitimately occupy a market neighborhood around $1,450, $1,900, or $2,700 depending on grade, while a high-end Philadelphia example might approach roughly $3,500 as it reaches MS-67 territory. These figures should be treated as approximate market context, not promises of what an individual coin will sell for. The collector is paying for a combination of scarcity and quality. A strong date matters, a properly shaped, undisturbed mint mark matters, complete lettering matters, a powerful strike matters, original luster matters, clean surfaces matter, and then comes eye appeal, the difficult-to-measure quality that causes one certified coin to command stronger bidding than another coin carrying the same numerical grade. On an issue such as the 1924S, where the starting population was already small, every improvement in condition can dramatically reduce the pool of acceptable candidates available to advanced collectors. But scarcity also creates danger, and this is where our investigation needs magnification. NGC has documented counterfeit 1924S Buffalo nickels because the large value difference between Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco examples gives dishonest alteration an obvious financial motive. A genuine Philadelphia coin can be modified by adding an S, or a Denver coin can be altered in an attempt to imitate the scarcer San Francisco issue. In one documented counterfeit examined by NGC, the supposed S had actually been hand-carved into the field rather than struck by a genuine San Francisco die. That example teaches a crucial lesson. The host coin itself may be genuine while the feature responsible for its apparent rarity is false. Under magnification, an experienced authenticator examines the mint mark's shape, placement, surrounding metal, surface texture, and relationship with known genuine dies. The date deserves similar attention because altered dates also exist within collectible U.S. coinage. Weight and diameter can provide preliminary information, but correct measurements alone cannot authenticate a valuable specimen. Die characteristics and microscopic surface evidence become increasingly important as the potential price rises. There are also legitimate production anomalies associated with buffalo nickels, but no viewer should interpret every crack, gouge, flattened leg, or unusual mark as a valuable mint error. PCGS registry material documents, for example, a 1924D struck approximately 25% off-center, and a minor Philadelphia, no F variety lacking Fraser's designer initial, has also been attributed. Those documented pieces demonstrate that genuine abnormalities exist, but they do not justify inventing an attribution for a damaged coin. Reliable error identification requires evidence that the irregularity occurred during minting, and important or expensive candidates deserve professional authentication. Preserving what survives is just as important as identifying it, because a century of natural history can be destroyed in minutes by improper cleaning. Suppose the nickel in front of us appears dark, dull, or lightly toned. The instinct to make it look new should be resisted completely. Polishing removes original surface texture, abrasive rubbing leaves microscopic lines, chemical cleaners can produce unnatural coloration, and attempts to scrape deposits away may permanently scar the fields. A clean 1924S remains a genuine 1924S, but damage can substantially reduce its desirability and prevent it from receiving the straight numerical grade that an original example might earn. Handle collectible coins only by their edges, preferably over a soft surface, and store them in inert archival quality holders rather than flexible plastics containing harmful PVC. Stable temperature and controlled humidity help limit environmental deterioration. For a potentially expensive 1924D or 1924S, professional certification can also provide physical protection while recording an expert opinion of authenticity and grade. At the same time, a grading service label should not replace careful observation. Compare the strike, inspect the fields, watch how luster moves, study natural tunning, and judge whether marks occur in visually sensitive locations. Competitive collectors building high-grade sets may evaluate several examples carrying the same grade before choosing one because the strongest specimen can have cleaner surfaces, more complete design detail, or simply better balance. This competition is one reason high-end buffalo nickels remain actively collected. Numerical rarity matters, but beauty and originality determine which individual coins people remember. The finest survivors cannot be manufactured today, and once original surfaces have been polished or genuine mint luster has been worn away, no restoration can recreate the untouched state in which the coin left the press. The final evidence comes from verified auction history, and it shows why responsible valuation must separate extraordinary specimens from ordinary examples. PCGS auction records list a high of $25,200 for a 1924 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel, $44,063 for a 1924D, and an extraordinary $105,750 for a 1924S. Those numbers are not the values of every nickel bearing those dates and mint marks. They represent exceptional certified coins whose grades, rarity, preservation, and competitive demand place them at the extreme upper edge of their respective markets. The 1924S result is especially revealing because it begins with the lowest mintage of the three and belongs to an issue already recognized as a regular series key. The Philadelphia coin tells a different story. Its mintage was much larger, yet a superbly preserved specimen can still become a formidable condition rarity. Denver occupies the territory between them, combining a much smaller original production with significant difficulty in premium grades. That leaves us with a method far more useful than any sensational price claim. Read the date first. Turn the coin over and establish the mint. Examine the lettering and major design elements. Determine whether softness comes from strike or circulation. Tilt the surfaces under light and search for original luster. Look for cleaning, scratches, corrosion, or unnatural alterations. Treat suspicious mint marks and supposed errors cautiously. Then, and only then, compare the coin with professionally graded examples and current market evidence. A worn 1924 Buffalo nickel, a sharp 1924D, and a certified high-grade 1924 may share Fraser's same artwork, yet numismatically they occupy completely different worlds. More than a century after these nickels passed through American hands, that difference is precisely what keeps collectors examining them. The real rarity is often not hidden in the large numerals of the date, but in the tiny details that survived around them. Next coin. The most mysterious feature on this United States buffalo nickel is not something that was added to it, but something that has disappeared: the date. Where 4 numerals should identify the year this coin entered American commerce, there is now only a smooth, worn area beneath the Native American portrait, leaving behind a question that has puzzled generations of people who discover these nickels in inherited collections, old jars, estate accumulations, and forgotten coin boxes. This is not an undated coin produced accidentally by the United States Mint, and in most cases it is not a rare missing date mint error. The coin originally had a perfectly normal date when it was struck. What happened afterward is a story of design, metal, circulation, and time. Buffalo nickels were produced from 1913 through 1938. And the location Fraser chose for the date made it particularly vulnerable to abrasion. PCGS even notes that on heavily worn dateless pieces, the small f, representing designer James Earl Fraser, may remain visible after the numerals themselves have disappeared. Millions of people have encountered worn buffalo nickels, but relatively few understand that a missing date changes how the coin can be identified, graded, attributed, and valued. Later, we will examine the circumstances in which an apparently ordinary dateless nickel might still deserve specialist attention, what characteristics experienced collectors search for, and why authenticated varieties or errors can belong to an entirely different market from a normal worn example. Before any value judgment is possible, however, we need to solve the central mystery. Why did the date vanish while so much of the rest of Fraser's remarkable design survived? The answer begins in 1913, when the buffalo nickel replaced Charles Barber's Liberty Head nickel and brought one of the boldest artistic designs ever placed on an American circulation coin into everyday commerce. Sculptor James Earl Fraser created a right-facing Native American profile for the obverse and an American bison, commonly called a buffalo for the reverse, deliberately choosing imagery that evoked an American identity rather than classical European symbolism. The series would continue through 1938, although no buffalo nickels were produced in 1922, 1932, or 1933. Every normal circulation strike followed the same fundamental physical standard: 75% copper and 25% nickel, a weight of 5 grams, a diameter of approximately 21.2 millimeters, and a plain edge. Production occurred at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Philadelphia pieces carried no mint mark, while D&S mint marks appeared beneath 5 cents on coins produced at Denver and San Francisco. Here is where our investigation becomes important. Because the date is gone, we cannot honestly assign this particular coin to a specific year merely by looking at its smooth date area, and therefore we cannot responsibly give it the mintage of one particular issue. If a mint mark survives, we may identify its mint, but a D or S alone does not reveal the year. The coin could have circulated through enormously different chapters of American history, from the years surrounding World War I and the prosperity of the 1920s to the Great Depression and the recovery years of the 1930s. 5 cents had meaningful purchasing power during much of that period, so these were intensely practical coins. They passed repeatedly from hand to hand, slid across counters, traveled in pockets, entered cash registers, and returned through banks. Every one of those contacts removed microscopic amounts of metal, and the architecture of Fraser's obverse made one particular area especially vulnerable. Under magnification, the reason becomes almost mechanical. Fraser placed the date on the raised shoulder area at the lower left portion of the Native American portrait. Instead of being protected inside a recessed field, the numerals stood in a location exposed to repeated friction. As the coin circulated, metal was gradually removed from this elevated area until the numerals weakened, merged with the surrounding surface, and eventually disappeared. This was a genuine design weakness rather than an unusual accident affecting one coin. Stack Bowers notes that the date was located at a high point and that large numbers of buffalo nickels eventually became dateless as they wore in circulation. The fascinating part is that mint officials had already recognized a closely related wear problem almost immediately after the series began. On the original 1913 Type 1 reverse, the bison stood on a raised mound, and 5 cents was positioned in that vulnerable raised area. The mint revised the design during 1913, creating Type 2 by placing the denomination in a recessed area beneath a flatter ground line, protecting 5 cents from rapid wear. That Type 2 arrangement continued through the remainder of the series, yet the exposed date on the obverse was never similarly protected. NGC specifically observes that despite modifications to the design, the rapid wear of the date was never corrected. So when someone says the date has expired or vanished, what has really happened is much simpler. Decades of physical friction have removed the raised metal containing the numerals. The date did not chemically expire, and the mint did not intentionally erase it. In normal circumstances, a completely smooth date is evidence of extensive circulation, where not evidence of a rare missing date error. That distinction completely changes the rarity question. A normal dateless buffalo nickel is not rare simply because its date can no longer be read. In fact, dateless examples became common precisely because the design was susceptible to this kind of wear. Without a readable date, determining the exact date and mint issue may be impossible, which prevents ordinary examples from receiving the same numismatic treatment as clearly identifiable coins. This is why experienced collectors resist the temptation to say, "No date means rare." Instead, they turn the coin over. Is the reverse Type 1, with the bison standing on a raised mound, or Type 2, with 5 cents recessed beneath the flatter ground? If it is Type 1, we immediately know the coin must come from 1913 because that reverse was used only during the first year. Next comes the mint mark area beneath 5 cents. A visible D identifies Denver, an S identifies San Francisco, and no mint mark indicates Philadelphia production for this series. Then comes wear. On the obverse, friction typically affects the Native American's cheekbone and hair near the part. On the reverse, the bison's hip, tail, fringe, and horn are among the areas that reveal wear early. A completely dateless specimen has generally traveled far beyond the grades in which original mint luster and delicate high-point detail survive. That means the normal four-figure values associated with exceptional buffalo nickels do not apply merely because the date is absent. Values around $1,300, $2,450, or $3,850 can certainly exist elsewhere in the buffalo nickel marketplace for appropriately authenticated scarce dates, varieties, errors, or high-grade coins, but attaching such figures to an unidentified dateless piece without evidence would be misleading. The missing date itself creates uncertainty. It does not create rarity. There is, however, a reason specialists still examine dateless buffalo nickels instead of automatically dismissing every one of them. The series contains genuinely important rarities and varieties, including such famous issues as the 1918 7D overdate and the 1930 7D three-legged buffalo, along with numerous other collectible die varieties. PCGS identifies the 1918 7D and 1930 7D three legs among the major keys of the series. But a critical rule applies. An unidentified dateless coin cannot simply be declared one of these rarities because one feature looks unusual. Genuine varieties are attributed through combinations of known die diagnostics, and extensive wear can eliminate precisely the evidence needed for confident identification. A weak or missing buffalo leg, for example, should never automatically be called a three-legged variety. Ordinary circulation wear, weak striking, scratches, tooling, and post-mint damage can remove design elements. Strike quality itself complicates the investigation because the hard copper-nickel alloy did not always fill Fraser's detailed dies perfectly. PCGS notes that many surviving buffalo nickels show areas of light striking, and certain Denver and San Francisco issues from the 1920s are especially notorious for weakness. Likewise, an unusual crack, indentation, flattened area, or missing feature is not automatically a valuable mint error. Genuine off-center strikes, clips, die-related anomalies, and other minting errors must show evidence consistent with something that happened during manufacture rather than after circulation began. This is where legitimate four-figure values can sometimes enter the conversation. A professionally authenticated scarce variety or significant error can potentially trade in the $1,000 to $4,000 range or beyond, depending on its exact identity, grade, rarity, and demand. But without a defensible attribution, a worn, dateless buffalo nickel remains exactly that, a worn, unidentified buffalo nickel. One method people sometimes use to uncover an invisible date deserves special caution. Commercial acid-based date restorers can react differently with the metal where the original numerals were struck, sometimes allowing an otherwise unreadable date to become temporarily visible. For a collector trying to identify an inexpensive curiosity, recovering the date can be interesting. But it comes with a serious numismatic trade-off. Chemical treatment alters the surface. A restored date does not magically return the coin to the condition it had before the numerals wore away, nor does it transform a heavily circulated piece into a high-grade rarity. For a coin suspected of being important, professional examination should come before any destructive or irreversible treatment. The same rule applies to cleaning. Never polish a buffalo nickel, scour it with an abrasive cloth, scratch around the date, carve suspected numerals, or aggressively clean the mint mark area. Those actions destroy original surface evidence that authenticators may need. Instead, handle the coin by its edges and store it in an inert, archival quality holder away from PVC-containing plastics, moisture, corrosive chemicals, and large temperature fluctuations. Authentication becomes especially important when someone believes a scarce mint or variety may be involved. Correct specifications, approximately 5 grams, 21.2 millimeters, copper-nickel composition, and a plain edge are useful preliminary checks, but measurements alone cannot establish a rare attribution. Specialists study die characteristics, surviving lettering, mint mark style and position, surface texture, strike characteristics, and evidence of alteration. If the date has been chemically restored, that fact should also be disclosed rather than hidden, because originality is an important part of collector evaluation. Grading a dateless coin also exposes an important difference between age and quality. A buffalo nickel may be more than 90 years old and still possess little numismatic rarity if it is a common issue worn beyond identification. Professional grading evaluates preservation rather than rewarding age by itself. At the opposite end of the spectrum, mint-state buffalo nickels retain no circulation wear and may display satiny or frosty original luster, with increasingly demanding standards as grades move from MS60 toward gem and superb gem territory. PCGS notes that sharply struck, minutely detailed buffalo nickels can be scarce even when the underlying date is otherwise available. Buffalo nickels also do not receive the red-brown and brown color classifications familiar to copper cent collectors. Instead, specialists pay attention to natural nickel gray appearance, tunning, brilliance, luster, strike, surface preservation, and overall eye appeal. That helps explain why auction headlines can be so misleading when removed from context. The Buffalo series contains individual coins that have achieved extraordinary verified prices, but those results belong to specific dates, mint marks, varieties, and grades, not to anonymous dateless specimens. Once the date is gone, we cannot responsibly attach the auction record of some famous buffalo nickel to the coin in our hand. Even if an expert can narrow its identity through remaining diagnostics, its heavy wear still matters. Collector psychology at the advanced level works in the opposite direction. Buyers compete most fiercely for certainty, originality, rarity, and exceptional preservation. A coin with a sharp date, confirmed mint, recognized variety, powerful strike, untouched surfaces, and high professional grade offers all of those qualities. A completely dateless coin begins with uncertainty, and that uncertainty generally reduces rather than increases its market position. And that brings us back to the smooth patch where the date once stood, because it may be the most historically revealing part of the entire coin. This nickel did not leave the United States Mint without a year. It became dateless because Fraser's beautiful sculptural design placed those numerals in an exposed location, and American commerce did the rest, transaction after transaction, year after year. The Mint recognized a comparable vulnerability on the reverse in 1913 and protected 5 cents by recessing it, yet the obverse date remained exposed throughout the series until Buffalo nickel production ended in 1938. That makes the absence of a date historically fascinating, even when it does not make the coin financially rare. A normal dateless Buffalo nickel is generally a common result of extensive wear. It has no single known mintage until its issue can be identified, cannot automatically inherit the rarity of any particular year, and should never be advertised as a valuable no-date error merely because the numerals have disappeared. At the same time, careful observation still matters. The reverse type can reveal whether a piece belongs to early 1913. A surviving mint mark can identify Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, and in exceptional circumstances, recognized diagnostics may justify further expert investigation. Genuine scarce varieties, authenticated errors, and superior identified coins can reach thousands of dollars, while extraordinary certified Buffalo nickels can occupy market levels far beyond that. But those values arise from documented rarity and quality, not from a worn-away date. The real significance of this coin is therefore more compelling than a sensational price claim. The missing numerals are physical evidence of how intensely American money once circulated, and they reveal why rarity must be proven rather than imagined. Sometimes the detail that disappeared is exactly what teaches a collector where to look next.